The Chosen Season 6, Episode 1 trailer has arrived, and it changed everything fans thought they were prepared for. 5 seasons of miracle and ministry and transformation have all been building to this single day, and this trailer makes absolutely clear that Episode 1 delivers the full devastating weight of what that means. Will Peter be able to live with himself in the hours after Gethsemane, knowing he ran while Jesus was taken away in chains? Will Judas survive the consequences of what his kiss in the garden set in motion? Will Mary Magdalene, the woman Jesus freed from darkness in the very first episode of this entire series, be able to find him now that the darkness has come for him? Will the disciples scattered from Gethsemane find a way back to each other? Or does Season 6, Episode 1 show them breaking apart at the very moment they are needed most? Will Malchus, the servant whose ear Peter severed and Jesus healed in the same breath, become the most unlikely witness to what follows? And will the show find a way to honor the profound humanity of Jesus in his most agonizing hours without losing a single ounce of the divinity that has defined him across 5 extraordinary seasons? Every single one of those questions has an answer, and this breakdown covers all of them. The single most important moment in this trailer is not the most dramatic one, it is the quietest. It is the moment that arrives in the first confirmed clip from Episode 1, when 9 disciples are walking away from the Garden of Gethsemane in the dark, and none of them are running, none of them are weeping openly, and none of them know what to say. What Dallas Jenkins has built in this scene is genuinely unlike anything The Chosen has done before. The show has spent 5 seasons giving these disciples specific voices, specific anxieties, specific ways of processing the world. Matthew, who handles suffering through recitation. Thomas, who channels grief into anger. Simon Z, who notices what others miss. Now those voices are arguing with each other in the dark about a question that is truly devastating in its specificity. Did Jesus know it would be Judas? Not whether someone would betray him. The Last Supper made it clear he knew that. But did he know it would be Judas, his friend, the man who kept the money and sat close at the table? That debate is not theological, it is human. And the fact that Episode 1 opens in that space, the space between what Jesus knew and what his followers could bear to believe, is something completely unexpected for a season, covering the most well-known story in human history. However, the situation is far more complicated than 9 men arguing in the dark, because 3 disciples are missing from that group. John and Peter have followed Jesus back to Jerusalem, where the trial is already beginning, and Judas is somewhere alone with what he has done. However, unfortunately, by the time Episode 1 ends, the consequences of that separation are going to become irreversible for all of them. The most likely explanation for what Episode 1 is building structurally is a simultaneous unfolding across 3 locations: Gethsemane's aftermath, the courtyard of the high priest, and wherever Judas has gone, and the evidence for this is clear in every confirmed clip and production detail that has emerged. Dallas Jenkins has said publicly that the show did something in Season 6 that other depictions of these events rarely attempt. It keeps the disciples active. The proof of this is visible in the confirmed clip from Episode 1, where the 9 disciples are not simply fleeing in all directions, as most portrayals show them doing. They are walking together, arguing, making plans, processing in real time. Jenkins described this scene specifically as the show's attempt to portray something the Gospels leave largely unaddressed: how the word about Judas spread among the remaining 11, how the disciples figured out what to do next, what it looked like to be inside that confusion from the inside, with no Gospel writer standing nearby to explain what it meant. The disciples argue about whether Jesus knew it would be Judas specifically who betrayed him, not just that a betrayer existed. Matthew, under the stress of the situation, falls back on reciting the Beatitudes, a detail that is pure Chosen, pure compassion for a character who processes pain through the words he has memorized. There is even, according to Jenkins' own description of the scene, unexpected comic relief as the disciples argue over which way to go at a fork in the road. The consequence of including that detail is significant. The show is saying that even in the worst hours of human history, people are still people, still bickering, still uncertain, still capable of being absurd in the middle of grief. The consequence of this for Episode 1 is that the audience is not watching helpless bystanders to events already known. They are watching people make choices that matter, even when those choices cannot change the outcome. And if this reading of the episode proves correct, the consequence for the disciples' arc across the whole season is enormous, because the show is establishing from the very first episode that these are not men who abandoned Jesus entirely. They are men who did what they could, imperfectly, in the dark, not knowing how any of it would end. That makes season 6 not a story about failure. It makes it a story about what faithfulness looks like when it has nowhere left to hide. But that development raises an even more dangerous question about Judas Iscariot. The final confirmed clip from the season 6 preview, the one shown at the very end of Dallas Jenkins' March 2026 livestream, is the one that will stay with fans the longest. It is Judas, alone, after the betrayal. Luke Dimian has spoken in interviews about the weight of portraying this moment, describing his preparation as the most spiritually demanding work he has ever done. The evidence from what has been previewed strongly suggests that the Chosen's treatment of Judas in season 6 is going to resist the easy reading. The easy reading is that Judas is a villain whose guilt is self-explanatory. What the clips suggest instead is that the Chosen is building a Judas who believed, in some broken and terrified way, that what he was doing would force Jesus to reveal himself, to stop the machinery moving toward the cross by demonstrating the power that everyone around him had witnessed for 3 years. The proof of this reading is in the confirmed detail from a sneak peek clip showing Judas watching through bars as Malchus facilitates John's entry into the courtyard of the high priest. The bars are not just architecture. The visual language is unmistakable. Judas is already imprisoned by what he has done, and he is watching the events he set in motion from behind glass he cannot break. And if this theory proves correct, if the Chosen renders Judas as a man in anguish rather than a man without conscience, the consequence for every viewer who has watched him across 5 seasons is going to be genuinely devastating. The most logical conclusion is that episode 1 plants the seed of Judas's collapse, so that when it comes later in the season, it lands not as justice but as tragedy. The evidence also points toward a third storyline in episode 1 that may be the most emotionally rich of all, and it belongs to Malchus. Malchus is the servant of the high priest whose ear Peter severed in Gethsemane and Jesus healed in the same instant, an act of grace so immediate and so inexplicable that it happened before the man had any chance to ask for it, deserve it, or even understand what was being given to him. His presence in the courtyard scenes of episode 1 therefore carries a weight the text alone cannot fully convey. The confirmed clips show Malchus in conversation with Judas and then with John and Peter outside the courtyard gate, and the visual framing in each scene positions him as something the show rarely creates, a witness who is neither follower nor enemy. Malchus knows what happened to his ear. He was there. He felt the sword and then felt the healing in the same terrible moment, and now he is standing in the courtyard where that same man is being tried for his life, and he has just agreed to let John inside the gate. The most likely explanation for why this detail receives so much attention in episode 1 is that Malchus functions as the audience surrogate for season 6, the person who has experienced Jesus directly and personally and inexplicably, and who now cannot make sense of what that experience means in the context of what is unfolding around him. Fans watching closely will notice that every scene featuring Malchus positions him at thresholds: the gate, the entrance to the courtyard, the space between the arresting party and the disciples. He is always in the middle, always in the position of deciding who passes and who does not. That is not coincidence. The show is using Malchus to ask the most honest question a bystander can ask in this story. What does a person do with a miracle they received without asking for it, when the one who gave it is now being led away to die? And if this theory proves correct, the consequence for episode 1's emotional arc is profound, because Malchus's quiet decisions in those threshold moments are the show's way of asking its audience, directly and without sentiment, what they would do in his position. While the main conflict of episode 1 unfolds across Gethsemane's aftermath and the courtyard of the high priest, there is another storyline, beginning quietly in the background, that every fan of the full series needs to pay attention to, and it belongs to Mary Magdalene. The confirmed clip showing Mary and 6 of Jesus's female followers trying to figure out where he has been taken is one of the most urgently human scenes in any preview footage from season 6. These women know less than the male disciples do. All they have is what someone told them, that Jesus was arrested in Gethsemane and taken to Jerusalem. They are making decisions in near total informational darkness, agreeing to split up and search different parts of the city, planning to meet again in the court of women when the first roosters begin to crow. The significance of that timing detail is almost unbearable for anyone who knows what else happens when the first roosters crow. And the show knows exactly what it is doing by including it. Natalie's story mirrors Jesus' own story of being found where no one expected him. What makes Mary Magdalene's arc in episode 1 so important is that she is the character whose entire journey in this series began with Jesus finding her in darkness and calling her back to herself. Season 6, episode 1 inverts that completely. Now she is the one searching for him in darkness, not knowing if she will find him in time, not knowing that finding him in time is not actually the point. Connecting this back to the main story, Mary's search in episode 1 is not a subplot. It is the emotional spine of the season, because it is the question every believer and every viewer has to hold. Where is he? And is he still there? And what do we do in the hours before we find out? What makes The Chosen Season 6 Episode 1 even more significant is its connection to everything the show has been building since Season 1. And understanding that connection is essential to understanding why this episode is not simply a beginning. It is a culmination. Season 1 opened with Mary Magdalene in darkness, possessed and alone, and Jesus speaking her name. Season 6, Episode 1, opens with the disciples in a different kind of darkness, one they fled into, and the question the show is now asking is whether the 5 seasons of formation they have received were enough to bring them back. Every miracle, every teaching, every late-night conversation on the road, every moment of doubt and restoration that this show has portrayed across hundreds of hours of television is being tested right now in Episode 1 in the simplest and most devastating possible way. Not by theological argument, not by the demands of ministry, but by fear and darkness and the absence of the one person who made all of it make sense. The connection between Season 5's ending and Season 6's beginning is specifically designed to honor that weight. Season 5 ended with Judas planting the kiss in the garden and Jesus seeing the torches coming toward him, understanding his hour had arrived. Jonathan Rumi told USA Today that in that moment he played Jesus experiencing some of the most human feelings possible: doubt, fear, sorrow, anguish, followed ultimately by trust. Season 6, Episode 1 picks up in the immediate aftermath of that trust being enacted, at the moment when every person around Jesus is feeling exactly those first emotions without yet being able to reach the last ones. Cross-show in the broader Yellowstone universe sense, the structural parallel that matters most here is between Season 6 and the eventual Season 7, because everything Jenkins has confirmed makes clear that Season 7 will cover the resurrection, and every choice made in Season 6, Episode 1, about how the disciples scatter, and who Mary searches for, and what Malchus decides at the gate, is a choice about who those characters are going to be when the stone is rolled back, and everything changes. Jenkins himself said that all 5 previous seasons were always leading to Seasons 6 and 7 together, not to crucifixion alone, but to the arc that begins in Gethsemane's darkness and ends in the garden of an empty tomb. Episode 1 is the first chapter of that arc, and understanding it as such changes what every scene inside it is actually doing. Creator Dallas Jenkins said at ChosenCon 2026 that he believes Season 6 is going to impact more people than any season the show has ever done. The evidence from every confirmed clip, every interview, and every production detail that has emerged makes it clear that Episode 1 is going to honor that weight without flinching from a single ounce of it. After everything the Episode 1 preview has revealed, the 9 disciples arguing in the dark, Judas imprisoned behind his own guilt, Malchus standing at thresholds only he can cross, and Mary Magdalene searching Jerusalem for someone she will not be able to save, the question every fan is now asking is the one that has been building since the Season 5 finale: when does all of this actually arrive? The Chosen Season 6 premieres on Prime Video on November 15, 2026, with 3 episodes releasing simultaneously. Episode 4 follows on November 22nd, Episode 5 on November 29th, and Episode 6 on December 6th. The season finale, covering the crucifixion itself, will release as a standalone theatrical event from Amazon MGM Studios in spring 2027. This release pattern is a first for the series, which previously debuted in theaters before streaming. The shift comes after Amazon MGM Studios struck a landmark deal with 5 and 2 Studios in 2025, securing streaming rights to the final 2 seasons. Season 6 was shot across 86 days, the longest production in the series' history, across locations in Texas, Utah, and Matera, Italy, where the cast spent 3 weeks filming the crucifixion sequence. With over 300 million viewers globally, The Chosen is one of the most watched series in the world, and based on everything Dallas Jenkins has shared, November 15th is going to be a day unlike any other in the show's history. Based on what this preview has shown, that wait is going to feel extraordinarily long. Now the conversation moves to the fans. Do the 9 disciples walking from Gethsemane in Episode 1 find a way back to each other before the trial of Jesus ends? Or does the show let them stay scattered long enough for the audience to feel what scattering actually costs? Does The Chosen's portrayal of Judas in his aftermath generate sympathy, grief, or something more complicated that fans will be debating for years? And when Mary Magdalene finally finds where Jesus has been taken, in the episode, in the season, in the story she has been living since he first spoke her name, does that reunion look anything like what 5 seasons of love and faith and watching prepared any of us to expect? The video on screen covers everything else fans need to know before Season 6 drops this November.